welcome to Vantage this week, a show where we recap the highlights of the week gone by, starting with the anniversary of the October 7th attack, when Hamas invaded Israel and Israel retaliated by invading Gaza. 1 year later, the conflict has snowballed. Now Israel is fighting on several fronts, including Lebanon. Israel has intensified attacks on Beirut and is preparing to strike Iran, where top military chiefs are now under the scanner over accusations of being Israeli spies. Meanwhile, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has addressed two key summits this week, the India-ASEAN Summit and the broader East Asia Summit. We'll bring you the highlights and tell you why Antarctica is turning green. All this and more lined up. Let's get started. One year of the October 7th attack, exactly 365 days ago, Hamas invaded Israel. The attack had shocked the world. It ended almost 2 decades of peace in Israel, or the closest they've been to peace in a long time. Israel retaliated against the Hamas by invading Gaza. 1 year later, the conflict has snowballed and it threatens to consume the entire region, all of West Asia. Now it appears that Israel will remain at war for the foreseeable future. It is fighting adversaries on multiple fronts and planning a direct strike on Iran, its biggest rival and sworn enemy. Israel is facing assaults from both the north and the south. In the north, it's Hezbollah. In the south, it's Hamas. Both launched attacks today. Air sirens rang out in several parts of Israel, including in Tel Aviv. Look at these pictures. This is a hotel building in Israel's Holon. A rocket attack by Hamas shattered its windows. Hamas fired at least 5 projectiles and left 2 people injured. This comes after Israel conducted airstrikes in Gaza yesterday. They struck 2 locations in central Gaza, a mosque and a school, which was being used as a shelter. Israel says these were Hamas command and control centers, and that is why they were attacked. The Israeli Defense Force, or the IDF, has no plans to go easy on Gaza. Today it issued fresh evacuation warnings, asking people living near Khan Yunis to leave. Khan Yunis is a city in southern Gaza. Similar orders were issued in the north as well. Fighting is intensifying in Lebanon too. Israel has struck more targets, more Hezbollah targets, and the other side is firing back. Yesterday, they shot more than 100 rockets across the border into Israel. And today, the Hezbollah conducted a fresh round of strikes. They damaged at least 60 apartments. They also targeted Haifa. Haifa is an important port city. Israeli forces have a base there in Haifa, and that's where the Hezbollah fired at, the military base. Now, reports say that they were successful. The rockets, the Hezbollah rockets, breached Israel's air defenses. According to reports, at least 10 people were injured. We don't have reports of any damage to the military base yet. Irrespective, the Israeli Prime Minister remains undeterred. He has vowed to keep fighting.
A year ago, we suffered a terrible blow. For the past 12 months, we've been changing reality from end to end. The whole world is astounded at the blows you inflict on our enemies, and I salute you and tell you, you are the generation of victory. Together we will fight, and together we will win.
We are changing reality. That's what Netanyahu said yesterday. He was visiting his troops in the north, where he's also deploying more troops in the north. Today, a new division of soldiers was sent to the north, taking the total number to 3 divisions, meaning 3 divisions of Israeli soldiers are stationed on the border with Lebanon. One division has anywhere between 7,500 to 10,000 soldiers. So going by this latest figure, Israel could have at least 20,000 troops fighting in the north. And that's not all. These ground troops are getting aerial support with the IDF's relentless barrage of airstrikes. So fighting is intensifying both in the north and the south. And then there is Iran, which is bracing for an attack from Israel. Over the weekend, Israel's defense minister spoke about this. His name is Yoav Gallant. And he had a message for Tehran. If you harm Israel, you'll end up looking like Gaza or Beirut. That's what he said.
The Iranians did not even scratch the capabilities of the Air Force. No squadron has been damaged. No plane has been damaged. There is no runway that doesn't allow takeoff. And there is no damage to our continuity. Whoever thinks that by trying to harm Israel, they will deter us from reacting, they only need to look at what is happening in Gaza and Beirut.
So what is Israel's plan? How will it respond to Tuesday's attack? Israel's military is taking its time. It says it will strike Iran at a time and place of its choosing. Tehran says it is ready, that if Israel attacks, they will strike back. Tehran says it has a list of, and I'm quoting, many Israeli targets. So a lot of saber rattling and a wider war looks imminent. Meanwhile, the US and other Western nations are going through the motions, calling for de-escalation, a ceasefire in Gaza, and the return of hostages. That's what they're asking for. At best, these statements sound futile because neither Iran nor Israel appear to be in the mood for diplomacy at the moment. At worst, they're hypocritical, asking for the fire to be doused while adding fuel to it. We start with the latest from West Asia, where the focus is on Lebanon. Its capital, Beirut, looks like a war zone. The sky is full of black smoke, sounds of explosions fill the air, and rubble is piling up on the streets. Last night, Israel struck Beirut again. It was their deadliest airstrike yet. Yesterday's attack alone killed at least 22 people. More than 100 others are injured. Israel hit central Beirut. It's a part of the city that was not targeted before. This area is packed with civilians with multiple apartments, and this is where Israeli forces struck without a warning. Who were they after? A man called Wafik Safa. He's a senior Hezbollah leader. Wafik Safa was a close ally of Hassan Nasrallah. Nasrallah was killed by Israel last month. Safa was one of his main negotiators, which makes him an important target for Israel, and that's why they wanted to kill him. But they failed. Wafik Safa managed to survive the strike, but some of the locals around him were not so lucky. Eyewitnesses say Israel carried out a devastating strike.
Who helped you? Did you go to the hospital, or did someone in the street help?
Someone on the street from the guys. I thought I was not going to survive.
What happened?
People have been humiliated, they have been. What can they do?
The situation in southern Lebanon is even worse. This is where Israel says it is hitting Hezbollah bases. To justify their operation, the Israeli Defense Forces have also released a video. It shows their spokesperson giving a tour of the house. Israel says that this was a Hezbollah base, where its fighters stored guns and grenades. Take a look at this.
Every house is a terror base. I wanted you to see in your own eyes what we found here today. This is our forces raiding on this village. Come with me. All of these weapons here were stored and piled in the house, ready for the big raid. You see the hand grenades here? Sniper rifles, extremely high sniper rifles, shooting on our forces, shooting on our civilians from far away. Look at those sniper rifles here.
The video is indeed quite dramatic. Critics say that this is part of the Israeli information war. In the early days of the Gaza war, videos like these were quite common. The IDF used to release them frequently. They were presented as proof of threat and the enemy's nefarious designs, and they were meant to justify Israel's military actions. Now, the same strategy is being deployed in Lebanon. The exact location of this Hezbollah base is not clear. Also, we don't know when the video was shot. Israel has not shared a lot of specifics, but it's made its intent amply clear. The IDF will escalate this war, and this has alarmed the region, especially the Gulf states. They are worried about Israel's next moves with respect to Iran. This week, Israel issued fresh threats. Remember, we told you about this. They said that they will retaliate and that the strike would be deadly, precise, and surprising. These were the exact words of the Israeli Defense Minister, Yoav Gallant. And they seem to have triggered more panic. The Gulf states are lobbying the United States. I'm talking about Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar. They want to avoid further escalation, and they want Washington to intervene to stop Israel from targeting Iranian oil sites. What is it that prompted this appeal? A threat from Tehran. It said that any Gulf assistance to Israel would be seen as an act of war. This includes opening up their airspace for any Israeli operation. Iran has delivered this message to the Saudis and drawn clear red lines with this warning. It is basically telling the Gulf states that if Israel attacks us, we will go after your oil facilities. You see, in the event of an all-out war, the Americans are expected to support Israel. And the Americans have military bases all over the Gulf. So Iran sees them as fair game. It's a scenario that Gulf countries want to avoid. The oil market is already feeling nervous. Prices of Brent crude have been volatile this week. Sweeping attacks on oil facilities will mean a sharp jump in oil prices. So these Gulf countries want America to stop Israel. But at this point, even the US seems helpless. Consider what Antony Blinken said today.
So Israel has a clear and very legitimate interest in doing that. The people of Lebanon want the same thing. We believe that the best way to get there is through a diplomatic understanding, one that we've been working on for some time and one that we're extremely focused on right now.
That's the US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken. He sounds completely out of touch with the ground reality. He keeps talking about a diplomatic solution. But for that, Israel will have to end its operations, both in Gaza and in Lebanon. And Netanyahu has shown no inclination to do that. In fact, he has opened up another front in this war. Israel seems to be going after the United Nations now. Iran has a lot on its plate right now. Israel is preparing to attack the country. Its proxies are under fire. There are fears of a wider war. So Tehran is dealing with a lot. And amid all of this, an earthquake struck the country last week on October 5th. The epicenter was close to Semnan, a city in northern Iran. It wasn't a very big earthquake. The magnitude was around 4.5 on the Richter scale, so relatively minor, but there were some strong tremors. In fact, it was felt as far as Tehran. So a minor earthquake, some tremors, no damage at all. At any other point in time, no one would care about something like this. But this one is different. And that's because of the timing. It's suspicious. Iran struck Israel last week. Israel vowed to hit back, and suddenly a mysterious earthquake occurs. Was it just another natural phenomenon, or was it the result of some human activity? The internet has made up its mind. They're calling it a nuclear test. Iran's first underground nuclear test that may have led to the tremors. But does this claim hold water? Can nuclear tests cause earthquakes? Did Iran really test its nuclear capability? And where does their nuclear program stand at the moment? Let's look at these one by one. First, do nuclear tests cause tremors? The answer is yes. They do. Any underground nuclear detonation can cause seismic activity similar to an earthquake, but not quite the same. For example, the depth of the tremor. This earthquake was shallow, around 10 kilometers deep. Usually, nuclear sites are located further underground. Then there's the detonation. It often causes an explosion on the surface. There was none in Iran, not that we know of. And no explosion is a very rare thing in a nuclear test. Plus, look at the magnitude. It does not indicate a nuclear explosion. Also, Iran is very prone to earthquakes. So this could be just another one. Having said all of this, there is still one point that raises doubts, and that is the location of this quake. In 2019, a Washington-based think tank released a report. It said that Iran was building underground testing sites, and one likely location was Semnan, very close to the main city. So Iran is said to be building a testing site here. This report came out in 2019. Now, 5 years later, West Asia is on the edge. Iran has to prove its might, and on cue, an earthquake occurs at the very same place. So a lot of people joined the dots and said this must be a nuclear test. Of course, it's hard to prove. There isn't enough evidence. But does Iran have the capability to launch a test like this, and that too so quickly? How advanced is their nuclear program? They started working on it way back in the 1950s, and they had someone helping them, the United States. That's right, Iran's now arch rival was once a close friend that got their nuclear program up and running. All was well until 1979, but then the Iranian Revolution happened. America's friend, the Shah of Iran, was toppled, and Ayatollah Khomeini took over. Initially, he was opposed to nuclear power, so their program was paused, but it resumed in the 1980s. And this time, Iran got help from countries like Russia. In 2002, it was found that Tehran had secret nuclear facilities. It was pursuing weapons-grade uranium. So until 2015, Iran was sanctioned heavily for its uranium enrichment and for its lack of transparency. But then in 2015, a deal was signed, the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, better known as the Iranian Nuclear Deal. Iran signed it with the US, the UK, France, China, Russia, and Germany. Tehran promised to limit its nuclear program. In exchange, the others agreed to lift sanctions. And it worked fine until 2018. But then Donald Trump pulled the plug. He exited the pact, the nuclear deal fell apart. Iran started breaching its commitments and building its nuclear capacity. As of today, it has a few known nuclear sites. This is where they're located. Look at the map. It also has some secret facilities and enrichment capability to build warheads. Experts estimate that Iran can build a bomb in a week. So the big question is, have they done it already? Has Iran built a nuclear bomb? Honestly, we have no way to verify, just like we have no way to know for sure if the tremor was an earthquake or a nuclear test. Tehran will not come clean, but we do know that it does want a nuclear deterrent. And if it has the capability, this would be the best time to build it. So Lebanon could be the next Gaza, in more ways than one. We've talked about the tunnel cities of Gaza. Well, such cities also exist under Lebanon, especially southern Lebanon. Hamas built the tunnels in Gaza and Hezbollah built the tunnels in Lebanon. It balances the military equation. You see, Hezbollah cannot match Israel's firepower, so they rely on unconventional tactics, like using tunnels for sneak attacks. And Israel knows this, which is why their military is targeting these tunnels. One of them was destroyed on Tuesday.
Our forces are operating and locating dozens of underground fighting infrastructures that do not penetrate the territory of the country. We are investigating and destroying them. Tonight we have updated that we have located and neutralized a tunnel about 25 meters long which crossed about 10 meters of the fence from the Marwan area in southern Lebanon near the territory of the State of Israel in Zer.
A cross-border tunnel. It starts from Marwahin in southern Lebanon and ends in Israel's Zarit. Total length around 25 meters, that's all. Now you can see why Israel is targeting them. These tunnels allow Hezbollah to sneak into Israel, perhaps carry out surprise attacks. That's what Hamas did on October 7th. They used the tunnels to sneak in undetected from Gaza. So Israel says we must prevent a repeat. Which got us thinking, how big is this tunnel network? Who built it and can Israel really destroy it? Well, the network is quite large. Reports say hundreds of kilometers long. Don't think of them as your normal city tunnels. They're more complicated. There are multiple levels of tunnels, multiple intersections and large staging areas. So it's less of a tunnel and more of an underground city. You have command centers inside, Iranian missiles inside, and hideouts for top leaders, all of them in these tunnels. Some of them are wide enough for trucks to drive on. Hezbollah released a sneak peek in August. Take a look at this. Most of these tunnels are in southern Lebanon, like we said, which is Hezbollah's stronghold. It allows them to be close to their main enemy, Israel. But these are the new tunnels. The old ones are more basic, barely wide enough for fighters to walk through. And what do they look like? Well, let me introduce the Hezbollah Museum, and I promise I'm not making this up. In the year 2010, Hezbollah launched a tourist attraction center. One of the items on display was this tunnel. It's around 200 meters long. The old ones date back to the 1980s. Hezbollah constructed them with help from an unlikely partner, North Korea. The Koreans had dug tunnels during the Korean War of 1950. It protected them from US bombing. That expertise was passed on to Hezbollah. Thus, the first round of digging began. It gained momentum after the 2006 war with Israel. That's when Iran ramped up assistance and special companies were set up for construction purposes. Now, the old tunnels were mainly meant for fighters. They could rest and evade capture. The new ones are home to Hezbollah's arsenal. Most of their Iranian missiles are stored inside these tunnels. And the logic is quite simple. Hezbollah doesn't have the luxury of an iron dome, like Israel does. They can't leave missiles out in the open. If they do, Israel will destroy them. So what's the solution? Store them underground in tunnels. In fact, Iran does the same. You may have seen videos of their so-called underground missile cities. The concept is pretty much the same. Since Iran has more money, their tunnels look better. The question then is, can Israel destroy them, these tunnels? Can they destroy them? In Gaza, they've had partial success. Some of the Hamas tunnels have been destroyed, but every week there is a new discovery. After all, it's a 500-kilometer network in Gaza. In Lebanon, it could be even more difficult, and that's because of the terrain. Gaza's tunnels are dug into the sandy soil, but in Lebanon, the tunnels are dug into rocky mountains, hard to find, harder to destroy, which is why Israel has deployed soldiers. They're basically combing across the terrain, looking for entrances to these tunnels, and sometimes with success. Look at this footage that was released yesterday. It shows Israeli soldiers discovering a tunnel shaft inside a house. Tunnel warfare is not new. It emerged in the 9th century BC. In modern times, it's been used to great effect. In Vietnam, the communists used tunnels to beat the Americans. In Korea, too, tunnels again kept the Americans at bay. In West Asia, this is just the latest theater. It's a tactic used to level the playing field, especially against a far superior enemy. The difference is that Israel knows what to expect. And they're not taking prisoners. In Gaza, Israel tried to find the tunnels first, but when they could not, they simply bombed the entire buildings. Will they do the same in Lebanon? The indications are it could be worse.
هر کجا لازم باشه مخصوصاً
Now let's turn to Israel's primary rival, that is Iran. Iran has been reeling over the past few weeks. Israel has been decimating Tehran's allies, Hamas chief Ismail Haniyeh, Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah, Nasrallah's potential successor, Hashim Safiuddin. Israel has taken them out one by one. This was bound to send alarm bells ringing in Tehran because Iran has spent years setting up its network of proxies, and Israel took out their leaders in quick succession. This has also raised questions. Does Israel have spies in Iran's top military force? Is that how they're being able to zero in on these leaders and kill them? The Iranian force in question here is the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. It is a military with multiple branches. They have their own army, a navy, and a rocket force. But in the fight against Israel, their most deadly unit is the Quds Force. It is the IRGC's unconventional warfare and military intelligence unit. The Quds Force is led by this man, Ismail Ghani. We mentioned him earlier this week. There were rumors that he had gone missing. But now some different rumors are doing the rounds, saying that Ghani is not missing. Instead, he is being interrogated. Tehran thinks that there is a chance that Ghani is an Israeli spy. Let that sink in. Ismail Ghani, the head of the Quds Force, the man responsible for organizing all of Iran's proxies, that man might be an Israeli spy. Let's look at the timeline of events to see why Ghani might be under investigation. We start with the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, the chief of Hamas. Haniyeh was killed on the 31st of July this year in Tehran, in the Iranian capital. He was killed at a guest house that was reportedly secured by the IRGC. Iran has not confirmed the exact method of killing yet, but one version is that a bomb had been planted in that guest house. And that does not paint the IRGC in a good light. Did they not check for bombs before housing such an important guest? So that was strike one. Strike two was the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah, the chief of Hezbollah. Nasrallah was killed on the 27th of September at the Hezbollah headquarters in Lebanon's capital, Beirut. How did Israel know where to strike? Could it have anything to do with Iran? With IRGC Brigadier General Abbas Nilforushan. He was killed along with Nasrallah, but some interesting details have now come out. Nilforushan was a member of the Quds Force. He was overseeing operations in Syria and Lebanon. He took over these duties in the month of April, after his predecessor was killed in an Israeli airstrike. So an Israeli attack led to Nilforushan's promotion. Fast forward a few months to September 27th, Nilforushan flies into Beirut that day, on the 27th. Reports say that Nasrallah had stepped away from the Hezbollah headquarters. But then he went back to meet Nilforushan. They met at the Hezbollah headquarters, and that is when Israel struck. It's quite the coincidence. So the IRGC was involved in both Haniyeh and Nasrallah's assassinations. But that still doesn't mean that the Quds chief Ghani was a spy. He should have still been above suspicion. But then the next attack took place, the assassination of Hashim Safiuddin, Nasrallah's heir apparent. And this time, the Quds chief was said to be directly involved. Ghani flew down to Beirut after Nasrallah's assassination. He reportedly arrived there on the 29th of September to assess the situation on the ground. He was apparently in touch with Safiuddin, and he was invited to a Hezbollah senior leadership meeting on the 3rd of October. Now, reports say that Ghani cancelled at the last minute and Israel later bombed that very meeting. Ghani has been under the radar ever since. Initially, there were rumors that he had been killed as well, but on Monday, Iran said that he was in good health. Ghani has not been seen in public, but an alleged photo of him from last Sunday has been doing the rounds. Ghani is seen here with Abdullah Safieddin, Hashim Safieddin's brother. This meeting reportedly took place in Tehran, so it seems that the Quds Force chief returned to Iran over the weekend. Now, here is what we know. 3 major Iranian proxy leaders are dead. The IRGC is linked to all 3 assassinations. The Quds Force, in particular, may have had ties to the last 2, and their chief was back in Iran. And this is where things get murky. On Monday, Ghani's deputy says that he is in good health, carrying on with his duties. On Wednesday, Ghani's aide makes a bold claim. He says that Ghani is about to get a medal from Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. And then yesterday, we see reports about Ghani being interrogated and suffering a heart attack during questioning. Yes, that's the most recent rumor, that Ghani had a heart attack during interrogation. We are sure to hear more rumors soon, official denials, secret sources confirming it, the works. We don't know what Ghani's fate will be, but we know one thing. Israel has succeeded in eroding the trust within Iran's establishment. No one is above suspicion anymore, and a hunt is on to find Israeli moles. Iran will need time to get its house back in order, and Israel will definitely take advantage of that. From deranged Twitter posts, let's move to an explosive book written by Bob Woodward. Woodward is a well-known American journalist. In the 1970s, he exposed the Watergate scandal that brought down the Richard Nixon administration. Woodward is now 81 years old, and he's still going after American presidents, past and present. And his latest book is called War. It is about the last 4 years, which means the lead character is Joe Biden. Now, normally, how do you perceive Joe Biden? Old, gaffe-prone, ineffective at stopping wars? Well, he's definitely all those things. But turns out he's also quite foul-mouthed. Now, every politician has a public persona. They dress a certain way, they behave in an acceptable manner mostly, and try to give sanitized speeches. But come on, we know that that's not how they talk in private. There's just no way. Well, Woodward's book confirms our suspicions, with a number of candid rants full of expletives attributed to Joe Biden.
That son of a Bibi Netanyahu, he's a bad guy. He's a bad guy. He's a liar. Bibi, what?
Yes, Biden has been quite angry with Benjamin Netanyahu, and he frequently abuses the Israeli Prime Minister in private. That is what Woodward's book says. Now, before I go further, quick clarification. Bob Woodward has not been tapping Joe Biden's office. He got all this information from sources. He interviewed dozens of people with access, White House aides who say that they heard all of this in person. Woodward, of course, has not revealed his sources, so Biden could just deny all of what he's written. Most of the people in the book can. So don't expect anything to change. The politicians will continue to don their well-rehearsed public personas and ignore everything in this book. Now, with that disclaimer out of the way, what does all of this mean? Why has Biden been swearing at Netanyahu? Well, it's obvious, really. Biden has been trying to prevent an all-out war in West Asia, but Netanyahu doesn't seem to care about that. According to Biden, Netanyahu only cares about his own political survival. Same with his staff, Netanyahu's staff. Here's what U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken allegedly thought of Yoav Gallant, Israel's defense minister. According to Blinken, and I'm quoting, Gallant's approach was, "It doesn't matter how many people die. I have a mission to eradicate Hamas, and it doesn't matter how many Palestinians die. It doesn't matter how many Israelis die." Let's face it, if Blinken is asked about any of this, he will probably deny it. Israel will definitely deny it. But what have we seen over the last year? We've seen the leveling of Gaza with our own eyes. American officials have seen it too, so they probably know exactly what Israel is doing, and Biden's private frustration makes sense. So that's one war covered in Woodward's book. Then we have anecdotes from the war in Ukraine.
They f***ed up in 2014. That's why we are here. We f***ed it up. Barack never took Putin seriously. We did nothing. We gave Putin a license to continue. Well, I'm revoking his license.
Biden apparently said all that before Russia began its invasion of Ukraine. Before. According to the book, the US knew about Russia's invasion months in advance. They knew by October 2021. They had a source inside the Kremlin. Apparently, the US tried to warn Ukraine. They even sent Kamala Harris to talk to Zelensky personally, and she apparently even told him to come up with a succession plan in case he were captured or killed. But perhaps the biggest claim in the book is about Russia wanting to nuke Ukraine. Back in late 2022, Putin apparently wanted to use tactical nuclear weapons, and Russia was laying the groundwork, saying that Ukraine was planning to use a quote-unquote dirty bomb. When the US found out, they called Russia directly.
If you did this, all the restraints that we have been operating under in Ukraine would be reconsidered. This would isolate Russia on the world stage to a degree you Russians cannot fully appreciate.
I don't take kindly to being threatened.
Mr. Minister, I am the leader of the most powerful military in the history of the world. I don't make threats.
Well, Russia hasn't used a nuclear weapon yet, thank God. Either the US was successful or none of this ever happened. Woodward isn't considered some infallible source. In fact, he has a lot of enemies, especially Donald Trump. Woodward has written multiple books about Trump, and Trump has sued him over this. There's a bitter feud there. Woodward took jabs at Trump in his latest book as well, accusing him of sending COVID testing machines to Putin. Trump sending COVID testing machines to Putin. Trump allegedly did this during the peak of the Wuhan virus pandemic when there was a shortage of detection machines. And apparently Putin tried to protect Trump. This is an exchange mentioned in the book.
Please don't tell anybody you sent these to me.
I don't care, fine.
No. I don't want you to tell anybody because people will get mad at you, not me. They don't care about me.
Trump has vehemently denied that this incident took place or this conversation took place. But Woodward did not stop there. He says that Trump continues to talk to Putin regularly. But again, he doesn't have any concrete proof, or he hasn't provided in the book. Whatever you think about these allegations, the new book paints quite a picture, one very different from the prim and proper facade that we're used to. It's the greatest mystery of this war. Some 66% of Gaza's buildings have been destroyed. Some 42,000 people are dead, but Yahya Sinwar lives. And nobody knows how. Sinwar took over as the Hamas chief in July this year. Before that, he was their military head in Gaza, and he is the one who plotted the October 7th attack. Since then, Israel has been hunting Sinwar in Gaza. They have bombed Hamas tunnels, raided his hideouts, and eliminated his deputies. Then last month, Yahya Sinwar went silent. Israel had struck a school in Gaza on the 21st of September. They said it was housing a Hamas command center. And after that strike, Sinwar went silent. No radio contacts, no reports of meetings, no couriers. Not even after Israel killed the Hezbollah chief. So Israel began investigating the strike. They wanted to know if Yahya Sinwar had been killed in that attack. We don't know the probe result, but some reports said that he was presumed dead by Israel. Now it turns out that he isn't, or so it appears. On Sunday, Israeli officials said that Sinwar was active again, that he made contact with Qatar. Now, Qatar, as you would know, is a mediator in this war. They've also been hosting a number of Hamas leaders, so the logic checks out. Sinwar has been communicating with and via the Qataris. But this time, Doha has not confirmed it. They say no direct contact was made. The truth is we cannot be sure because Sinwar has been a slippery customer. Israel has come close to eliminating him multiple times, but each time he escaped. sometimes by surrounding himself with hostages, basically human shields. It's a ruthless but surprising feat. Just think about it. Israel managed to kill Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. They managed to kill Hassan Nasrallah in Beirut, but they have not been able to take out Yahya Sinwar, that too in territory that they, the Israelis, occupy. So what's the secret here? Well, the tunnels are a major reason. Hamas has basically built an underground city in Gaza, a tunnel network that is 500 kilometers long. It's like a maze down there. Very hard to track down and raid. And Sinwar has used it to his advantage. In February, Israel's military released this video. It is said to show Sinwar fleeing through a tunnel. The second tactic is communication. Sinwar is largely off the grid. He does not use mobile phones, he does not use pagers. He is relying on ancient methods like handwritten notes and human couriers. Even for mediation, that is his strategy. He sends a message via human couriers. The couriers pass it over different levels, and finally it reaches someone with a phone, maybe a Hamas operative or maybe an Arab mediator in Gaza. That is how Yahya Sinwar has been communicating. And this is a problem for Israel. Their expensive and extensive espionage network is based on technology. No technology, no tracking. In fact, some reports say that Israel is poking Sinwar. They're purposely putting a question mark on his status in the hope that he will react. Maybe release a statement to say that he is alive, and then he can be tracked. Again, we cannot confirm these reports, but it certainly sounds like something Israel will do. Having said all of this, one question still remains. What is Sinwar's role in this war? How will his death or his capture affect this war? Well, Sinwar is the Hamas chief. He also leads their fighters in Gaza, so he is the final voice on a ceasefire, much like Benjamin Netanyahu is the final voice in Israel. It's Yahya Sinwar in Gaza. Without his agreement, there can be no deal. So that's the first thing, a ceasefire. Secondly, killing Sinwar would be a strategic win for Israel. Yes, there is a revenge angle to it, but it's also strategic. Sinwar represents a radical Hamas faction, a faction that is willing to launch terror attacks like October 7th. Plus, he's among the few leaders left. A number of Hamas commanders have already been killed, like Mohammed Deif, an October 7th plotter, Marwan Issa, a Hamas deputy commander, Saleh al-Aruri, a military commander, and Ibrahim Biari, commander of Hamas's Central Battalion. It goes without saying that every group needs leaders and Hamas is running out of them. Which is why Yahya Sinwar's role is so important. He is one of the few decision makers left. If Israel can take him out, they can claim a big victory, perhaps even wind down the operations in Gaza. Until then, this manhunt will continue. Now let's look at what India has been up to. Prime Minister Narendra Modi wrapped up 2 hectic days of diplomacy. He was in the Southeast Asian nation of Laos to attend 2 key summits. Yesterday, we told you about the India-ASEAN summit, about India's cooperation with the bloc. Today, Prime Minister Modi was at a broader forum, the East Asia Summit.
The East Asia Summit. It's a summit of the 10 ASEAN nations, along with 8 others. India is one of them, of course. Then you have the US and its allies, and Russia and China. As you can see, it's a diverse group, and it has the potential for conflict. So it's a good thing that India was there to calm things down. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi was the first to speak after the host nation, and he reiterated India's take on global problems. He said, "The conflicts going on in different parts of the world are having the most negative impact on the countries of the global south. Everyone wants that, whether it's Eurasia or West Asia, peace and stability should be restored as soon as possible. I come from the land of Buddha, and I have repeatedly said that this is not the era of war. Solutions to problems cannot come from the battlefield. Prime Minister Modi believes that war is not the solution. He continues to call for peace. And hopefully his words will sink in one of these days. One more thing of note was how he highlighted the global south. He pointed out that the wars have had a negative impact, and the brunt has been borne disproportionately by the global south. Despite the region having no role to play in the fighting, it has been hammered economically. It is collateral damage. India is in a unique position though. It's a fast-growing economy with a massive population, so India has heft at global forums, which is why Prime Minister Modi always calls for an end of wars. It's India's way of trying to be the voice of the global south and raising our issues at the global stage. Hopefully the belligerent forces around us will listen. But while waiting for reason to kick in, India's Prime Minister kept himself busy with other matters. After the East Asia Summit speech, he proceeded to hold bilateral meetings. Modi met with New Zealand's Prime Minister Christopher Luxon. They discussed a potential free trade agreement between the two countries. Luxon said that he's hopeful that such a deal could manifest in the next 2 years. After that, Modi spoke to the US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, and Thailand's new Prime Minister, Paetongtarn Shinawatra. Again, expanding trade was on the agenda. Then came the main bilateral between Prime Minister Modi and his Laotian counterpart, Prime Minister Sonsai Siphandone. Remember, Laos was the host country for this East Asia Summit, so of course a major bilateral was part of the agenda. India and Laos signed multiple MOUs on defense cooperation, customs, broadcasting, and some smaller cultural projects. India has agreed to provide about $150,000 to Laos to preserve temples and murals, and about $1 million to boost food security. Before leaving, Prime Minister Modi gifted some handicrafts to all the leaders he met, a way to showcase Indian craftsmanship. All in all, it was a successful trip for the Indian Prime Minister to Laos.
Let's turn to India now. The top headline is election results. These were regional elections for legislative assemblies, one from Jammu and Kashmir and the other from Haryana. And what's the verdict? In sporting terms, it is 1-all. The Congress and the National Conference have won in Jammu and Kashmir, and the BJP has won in Haryana. It's their third victory in a row. And within this scoreline, there are many stories. So let's take a closer look. This was Kashmir's first election since 2014, also the first since Article 370 was removed, the article that gave Jammu and Kashmir special powers. It was scrapped in 2019. So the election campaign this time was framed around that issue. The BJP said it was a masterstroke, scrapping Article 370. The opposition called it a betrayal. Let's look at the numbers now. The National Conference has won 42 seats. That's the party of Omar and Farooq Abdullah. They were allied with the Congress Party and the Communist Party. The Congress won 6 seats. The Communists got 1 seat. So put together, this bloc, this opposition bloc, has got 49 seats. Now, to put that in context, the Jammu and Kashmir Assembly has 90 seats. The majority mark is 46. They've got 49. It should be smooth sailing for the NC and the Congress. Omar Abdullah is expected to be Chief Minister again. And what about the BJP? Well, they have won 29 seats, all of them in the Jammu region. But we'll come to that later. You see, this victory is a very consequential one. Just look at the NC manifesto. They have promised to work towards the restoration of Article 370, basically to restore special powers to the state. They also want to modify or cancel laws that were passed after 2019. Of course, 370 is the centre's domain. The state government plays no role or no part in it. But it does set the stage for an interesting period ahead, possibly one of friction. Nonetheless, let's look at the big takeaways. First of all, democracy has returned. We did not see any violence during this election. No one's complaining about the results. And that's what ultimately matters. Peaceful and fair elections. That's a big, big win. Secondly, the hardline elements have flopped. Dozens of separatists had joined the poll fray as independents, including allies of separatist leader Engineer Rashid. He's in jail for a terror financing case. But he was granted bail to campaign. Even the Jamaat-e-Islami had fielded candidates in this election. They were all expected to make an impact, maybe cut into the vote bank of the National Conference, but clearly they did not. Only 7 independents managed to win this time. And the third big takeaway, Jammu and Kashmir is a story of 2 regions, the Kashmir Valley and Jammu. Just look at this map. All of the BJP's wins are in the Jammu region, which is largely Hindu-dominated. All of National Conference's wins are in Kashmir, which is Muslim-dominated. And this was the case in 2014 as well. The BJP swept Jammu and the PDP, or the People's Democratic Party, swept Kashmir. This time the PDP is nowhere. They've been reduced to just 3 seats. Even party chief Mehbooba Mufti's daughter Iltija lost her seat. It looks like their voters shifted to the National Conference. Still, the NC is asking the PDP to join their coalition, sort of like a show of unity. And that is the story from Kashmir. The Abdullahs are back in power. They have traditionally had good relations with New Delhi, but this is post-370 Kashmir, so let's see how it goes. Which brings us to the second state, the state of Haryana. The day began with celebrations at the Congress headquarters. Early trends gave them 60 out of 90 seats. It looked like the Congress may oust the BJP in Haryana, that too after 10 years in power, 10 years of the BJP rule. But close to noon, the numbers changed. The BJP raced ahead of the Congress, and look at the final tally. The BJP has won 48 seats, which is a shade over the majority mark of 46. And the Congress has got 37 seats. It's a remarkable win for the Bharatiya Janata Party. A, because no one really gave them a chance. Most exit polls predicted a Congress win. And B, because it's a victory against anti-incumbency. Like I said, the BJP had been in power since 2014. No party had won 3 consecutive elections in Haryana before this. So the odds were against them. But the BJP managed to improve its tally, not only win, but improve the tally. They won 40 seats in the 2019 election, the last election. This time, they've got 48. Now, the Congress is not happy about the shift in numbers. They're talking about foul play by the Election Commission.
शिकायतें आ रही कि कैसे बैटरीज जो मशीन की थी वो 99% और जिन मशीनों की बैटरीज 99% थी, उन मशीनों में नतीजा एक आया, हमें हराने वाला नतीजा आया, और जो मशीनें नहीं जिनको छेड़ा गया, जिनकी बैटरी 60-70% जो स्वाभाविक या होनी चाहिए थी, उसमें हम जीत रहे हैं हमारे कैंडिडेट।
Well, the complaints, I'm sure, will be investigated, but frankly, it's a losing battle. You cannot accept the system in Kashmir and question the same system in Haryana. It's a clear double standard. The Congress should rather introspect. They were set to be in pole position in the state of Haryana. So how did they mess it up? A lot of factors are being talked about, including infighting in their ranks. You see, there were 3 chief ministerial aspirants in the party, in the Congress party: Bhupinder Singh Hooda, Kumari Selja, and Randeep Surjewala. It's a situation that inevitably backfires. But let's also look at the bigger picture. What do the results in Haryana mean for Indian politics? Again, 3 things. 1, it's a speed bump for the opposition. They were flying high after the Lok Sabha elections, despite losing. There was talk of a Congress resurgence. A victory in Haryana may have added momentum to those conversations, but now questions will be asked. The Congress had a direct face-off with the BJP in Haryana. They had issues to capitalize on. And their leader, Rahul Gandhi himself, led massive marches and rallies. Yet they lost. Secondly, it's a big relief for the BJP. In the Lok Sabha, they suffered setbacks in northern India, in states like Haryana, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, and Himachal. But this result shows that it's not a free fall, that they can still turn it around. And finally, number 3, it sets the stage for elections in Maharashtra. That's the big one coming up. Maharashtra is the richest state in India. It's currently ruled by a BJP coalition. Let's see how that one unfolds. Speaking of which, let's turn our attention to the coldest place on Earth, Antarctica, which is not as cold as it used to be, all thanks to, you guessed it, climate change. It is heating up the icy continent, and it is turning Antarctica green. Now, parts of Antarctica have a lush landscape, from mosses to flowering plants. All are growing at a dramatic rate. There has been more than a 10-fold rise in vegetation growth over the past few decades. What does this mean for the world? and is alarming greening limited to Antarctica. Here's a report.
Looks like an ideal picnic spot, doesn't it? But believe it or not, this lush landscape is none other than Antarctica. Yes, icy Antarctica, the coldest place on Earth. Parts of the continent are turning green. Flowering plants and mosses are spreading, specifically across the Antarctic Peninsula, which is a long mountain chain that is the northernmost part of mainland Antarctica. A new study is out. It says that over the past few decades, the plant cover has soared more than tenfold. In 1986, vegetation covered less than 1 square kilometre of the Antarctic Peninsula. But by 2021, plants spread to cover almost 13 square kilometres, and this process has only sped up with each passing year. For instance, the plant growth accelerated by more than 30% between 2016 and 2021. While this may seem like an exciting and even an Instagrammable phenomena, scientists have used satellite images to analyze this vegetation. And their response has been singular. This kind of plant growth is alarming. It's sparking major concerns. After all, it's a result of climate change, which is heating up the icy continent. Over the past few years, extreme heat events have gripped the region. This year, parts of Antarctica witnessed record-breaking heat waves. Temperatures climbed up to 10 degrees Celsius above normal. This may not sound like much, but for Antarctica, this was a near-record heat wave. What is the heat record for this part of the planet? It happened just 2 years before, when in 2022, temperatures reached 21 degrees Celsius above normal. And these heat events don't just change the iconic landscape of this icy continent, they cause tremendous harm. The more the region greens, the more soil forms, which means it will become unfavorable for present species and invite invasive species. From seeds and plants to animals who will find their way to Antarctica and become a potential threat to the native wildlife. Plus, Antarctica's ice is very important for the world. It reflects solar radiation back into space. This helps keep our planet cool. If the ice reduces, Antarctica will reflect less heat. Why? Because of Science 101. Darker surfaces absorb more heat. So as the greening increases, Antarctica's ability to do this job reduces, which further warms up the planet. So the risks are obvious. And if this scares you, look at the bigger picture, because what's happening in Antarctica is not limited to the region. Thanks to climate change, greening has also been reported in the Arctic, where in 2021, rain fell for the first time ever and not snow. The Sahara Desert, one of the driest places on Earth, is also turning green thanks to heavy rainfall this year, which has made floods stronger and more frequent. With worsening climate change, our iconic landscapes have turned into a nightmare dressed like a daydream.
It was hard finding something funny today, so we turned to our source of unlimited humour, the Pakistan cricket team. They're playing a test match against England right now. It's a home game in Multan. Pakistan batted first and made 556 runs. Impressive, right? But don't forget the age-old saying in cricket, the other side has a bat too. And looks like England came with massive bats. Because guess how much they made? 823 runs. It was embarrassing and humiliating for Pakistan. In other words, a normal Wednesday. Of course, fans are not happy about this thrashing. They're mocking the Pakistan players on social media. Some Indian users have also joined in. I guess it's one thing that both countries agree on: how bad the Pakistan cricket team is.
क्या हो गया तुम्हें? क्यों नहीं बोल रहे हो? कुछ तो बोलो.
माफ करना, गुस्से में इधर उधर निकलता है।
ओ भाई मारो मुझे मारो मारो
Firstpost decodes the U.S. election, explains how America chooses its president. Your primer on the race to the White House. Everything you need to know about how America votes and its global implications. U.S. election explained. Every Monday and Thursday only on Firstpost.